Hey, Islam, the mystery religion. Why is Islam a mystery religion? Well, there's a lot of misinformation surrounding Islam, and in this video I hope to enlighten anybody watching about why certain people remain ignorant about Islam and why they will continue to be ignorant about Islam. There are a handful of facts to take into consideration. The first is the most obvious fact that the Quran is written in Arabic, specifically classical Arabic. The Quran is written in classical Arabic. Second fact to take into consideration is that most Muslims are not actually Arabic and therefore cannot speak or read Arabic. Then you have to take into account the fact that, well, two more things, at least. The first one is that most people who affiliate themselves with a religion don't actually read the book of that religion. They don't actually take time to educate themselves about that religion, even though I think this is actually... never mind. But yeah, most people don't actually read their own holy book. This goes for every religion that has a holy book. But then, even the Muslims who do speak Arabic, they don't speak classical Arabic. A practicing or non-practicing Muslim friend of mine compared the classical Arabic of the Quran to Shakespearean English. And so that makes me think, obviously, that classical Arabic is difficult for the average Arabic-speaking Muslim to understand. It's at least as difficult as Shakespearean English, if my friend is right. And after hearing these things, you may be thinking to yourself, well, I kind of see where you're going with this. What about translations? Don't Muslims, they can read translations of the Quran, or maybe more modern readings of the Quran, readings of the Quran in modern Arabic? And the answer is no, because the real Quran, the actual Quran, is the classical Arabic Quran. And you know, even Muslims who don't speak Arabic and don't read Arabic, they will try to repeat the Quran as they've heard it from maybe recordings. They will try to repeat the Quran in Arabic, just making the noise, not having any idea what they're saying at all, because the point for a lot of Muslims is not to understand the Quran, but to just recite the Quran, to memorize the sound of the Quran, because they believe this is God's language, these are God's words. So for these Muslims, for a lot of Muslims, why would you want to memorize or recite anything other than the exact words of God as in the classical Arabic of the Quran? So a lot of Muslims, they don't want to read translations because they don't consider translations to be the Quran. They want to read the Quran, not a translation of the Quran. And so I say all that to basically say that there has to be such an education problem, such a huge problem of ignorance in the Islamic world if most Muslims can't read Arabic, or most Muslims can't read even modern Arabic, and even the Muslims who can read and write and speak modern Arabic can't read the classical Arabic of the Quran, and they won't read translations of the Quran. And to top it all off, most Muslims, like any other religion, don't actually read their own book anyway. So this has to create just massive ignorance in the Islamic world, because, you know, how are you supposed to know? How are Muslims supposed to know what the Quran says and what Islam teaches? They can't get it from the Quran. the only thing I could think of is that they obviously get it from teachers at the mosque, sheikhs and imams at the mosque. And then the problem with that is obviously, well, you are not trying to understand the Quran for yourself. You're not reading what the Quran actually says. You're just taking the interpretation of another human being. So, who are you following? Ultimately, who are you following? Are you following Allah and what He said in the Quran, or are you following your sheikh? Are you following the interpretation of another man, another human being? And actually, I think that taking the interpretations of another human being is actually worse than a translation, because a translation is just it's not, it has no perspective injected into it, it has no opinion injected into it, it has no human bias injected into it at all. Or theoretically, that's what translators try to do. They try to be very objective. And it's easy for them to do because this is just language, and language has rules, syntax, grammar. So a translation is much less likely to have bias and human influence. But an interpretation is nothing, well, not nothing, but an interpretation is guaranteed to have bias and personal influences and the taint of perspective and experience of the person who's trying to tell you what it means. So I think an interpretation is actually worse than a translation. But yeah, I made the points that I wanted to make. The first main point I wanted to make, which was just that all of these facts, I can only see them conspiring to cause a lot of ignorance in the Islamic world about what Islam actually teaches. But another point I wanted to make about all of this is that this puts non-Muslims in a very unique position. It puts non-Muslims in a very unique position because we will read the translations of the Quran. We don't mind it. Because we're not trying to be so reverent towards the Quran that we will actually sacrifice understanding it, which is basically what Muslims are doing. Well, in some cases. Actually, in the case of not wanting to read translations, that's what they're doing. But my point is that non-Muslims are in a unique position to understand Islam better than Muslims do. And we need to take advantage of that. We really need to take advantage of that. So, yeah, Islam is indeed a mystery religion because there is a lot of misinformation surrounding it in the media, which is mostly to say that Islam is a very peaceful religion. It's very innocuous and nice and harmless, and it's good for the West in general. And then there's also the ignorance surrounding Islam, or misconceptions surrounding Islam in the Islamic world itself, because most Muslims are not going to end up understanding their religion, because, like I've been saying, I mean, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but Muslims can't read the Quran. Most Muslims can't read Arabic. They can't read classical Arabic. Most people in general won't read their own holy book. And then most Muslims won't read a translation of the Quran because it's not actually the Quran. So there are a lot of factors that all come together to mean basically that there are a lot of Muslims who are not understanding their religion, and they're not gonna. But like I said, this puts non-Muslims in a very unique position, because we will gladly read the translations and we'll understand it better than the Muslims do. So, in a way, Islam is a mystery religion to a lot of Muslims themselves. But anyway, my point for the last bit of this video is just that non-Muslims watching this, if you are passionate about freedom, if you are passionate about human rights, You need to know what the Quran says, what Islam teaches, and how it is antagonistic to freedom and human rights, and speak out against it. Speak out against it. Because Islam is diametrically opposed to everything that the West stands for with regards to human rights, human dignity, and freedom of the individual. So non-Muslims take advantage of the fact that we can understand Islam better than Muslims, and do it. See you later.